My name is Eric Kinsey. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, and you're listening to Rulers and Riders, the podcast where we talk to creative people about what they do and what they ride. My guest this week on the show is Eric Anderson. Eric is a motorcyclist, an Indy 500 photographer, as well as being a locally renowned architect. Eric just completed a pretty big-time project in downtown Indianapolis of his own design, and that is the Julia Carson Transportation Center. Eric is also a really humble dude. He likes to ride motorcycles. He likes to wrench on them. He's got a pretty good little collection of some really neat classics. A little bit of a departure from some of our previous guests. Not a chopper dude. He's just more of a classic and vintage bike guy, but he has awesome taste. He and his wife just purchased a modern home, and they've been restoring and remodeling that to their specs. So I got to go over a couple months ago and see it just after they had purchased it. And then for our interview, we sat down in his sort of office space in his basement, and really made a lot of progress. I took some pictures, and I'll post those on the blog for everyone to see. Had a good chat. Had a little bit of audio difficulty again. I don't know if it's this microphone I've bought or the adapter I use for the iPod, but man, it drives me crazy. So audio quality is decent, and you can hear definitely what we're talking about, but that damn little microphone I spent a bunch of money on is just not working out, so a little frustrated with that. So the conversation just kind of starts with us talking, and we cover some of his origins, his taste in bikes, talk about architecture, and we kind of go on a little bit of a tangent about 9/11, which I thought was pretty interesting, so I kept it in. Unfortunately, we didn't get to talk about his Indy 500 photography, but I'll post some pictures on the blog. All in all, great dude, good chat. One of the people in Indy that I've always enjoy seeing and chatting with. Just good dude, super intelligent, great taste. All the things I look for in a guest on Rulers and Riders. Let's talk to Eric. So yeah, one of the podcasts I listen to, it's Chris Shiflett, and he does. He's like the guitar player in the Foo Fighters. Okay. But he also has this podcast called Walking the Floor, and it's kind of like one of the things that like influenced me to like do this. But he like mainly talks to musicians. Yeah. And usually like country roots oriented musicians, but he'll have like occasional screw ups on his recordings, and it's funny because like he'll interview people, and like he's in the Foo Fighters, so it's like he pretty much anybody he asks, they'll just give him an interview. Yeah. And there was one where he was interviewing John Doe from X, and he kept losing the Wi-Fi connection, and like you could tell by like the third or fourth time, John Doe was just like, "Are you gonna get it right this time, dude? Like, what are we doing? Like, I'm a busy man. I'm old. I'm a punk rock legend. I just want to get this over with." So, sorry about that. All right.
No worries.
So before the recording took a crap, Eric and I were talking about how he moved from Morton, Illinois to Lafayette, Indiana. So you were telling me about your art teacher.
Yeah.
And his little trick he would play on you that kind of taught you a lesson about architecture.
Yeah, Terry Jackson from Lafayette Jefferson High School probably taught me the best lesson I've gotten today about like art and architecture and the world. And what he used to do would be to come up while I was doing something, drawing or painting, more likely painting because it was easier. But he would take a brush and swipe the painting while it was still wet. And basically fuck up the painting. But his reasoning was, and what he later told me, was that this art wasn't going to be for myself. I shouldn't think of it as something precious to only me.
Right.
It should be something that I'm doing for someone else.
Right.
At the time, he knew, I think, that I was going into architecture. So he knew I wouldn't be, designing my own buildings for myself. They would always be for a client. So that really kind of taught me to put a client's needs and desires ahead of my own.
Right.
Because even though they've hired me, they want my opinion to do whatever it is that they're working on. It's still ultimately their building. I have to be able to say, okay, Eric, this isn't yours. You have to put those desires aside.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty profound.
Yeah, it is. Of all the mediums you worked in, and for having, like you were telling me before the recording cut off, how you would put paper on the walls just to draw on your walls. For having such a drive to create and explore all those different mediums, what was it that made you settle on architecture?
That's a good question. I think at the time, my thought was that architecture was something that I could use as a way to either affect the greatest number of people with my art, in air quotes, being that, if it's a public building, a lot of people interact with this building. They get to be in that, and they get to try to understand what I was thinking when I was designing it.
Right.
Or, in the case of a home, you get to affect, a family, a couple, a single person, in kind of the most profound way you can, in that they're interacting with the space in a really personal kind of level, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was the end-all, be-all. That's going to be so great.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I went to Ball State for a year, and I definitely, you could always tell the architecture students.
Yeah.
They had such a focus and a drive and a seriousness to them.
Yeah.
That Ball State's kind of a party school.
Yeah.
And
we did our fair share of that too, though.
Yeah. But it just was different. It was a very much more it was almost like a world apart. At Ball State. And I was in the art program there, and there's some overlap.
Yeah, definitely.
But you could always, when you would be in the art building, you could tell. It's like, oh, that guy's in College of Architecture and Planning.
He doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've never heard that from call it an outsider's perspective, but I could definitely I could understand that for sure. It seemed serious, even though we goofed off a lot.
Yeah, I feel like, and having worked as a carpenter too, I feel like my interaction with architects, it's just such a different intellectual approach to building, number one, the technical side of it, but even the creative side of it. It's just so meticulous.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like to me you really have to be a special kind of person.
I think that's what architecture school is all about, is changing the way you think and changing how you interact with the world.
Right.
The good and bad about architecture is that you kind of have to, well, in order to be good at it, you have to really be able to think about all things at once.
Yeah.
Or at least be able to gather as much information as possible to mentally churn through it to come up with a solution that works for as many of the situations as you're given.
Right.
But I miss the idea of just going out there and starting something.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes in architecture you lose that kind of spontaneity where you can overthink things, and then eventually it just becomes a bland sort of, well, there was all this stuff that we had to take into consideration, well, you get this.
Yeah.
It's a beige box.
Yeah.
You know, so
Exactly.
there's pluses and minuses for sure.
Yeah. I always was curious about, like, so when you get a commission, does the customer just come in and say, like, these are our specs, do what you want, or is it sometimes?
Yeah, it runs the gamut. I mean, you get people that say, well, I'll use the Nature Conservancy on Ohio Street as an example.
Okay.
They basically came to us and said, here's what we'd like to do. Here's what we think we need. We will trust you to show us how to get there in the most efficient way.
Right.
And that was a great experience. They wanted a LEED Platinum building back in 2007, when everybody said that, oh, you can't build a highly sustainable building for the same cost as a regular building.
Right.
And they brought us that challenge and said, hey, can you guys do this? And we said, we think we can. and it was only because they allowed us to tell them, hey, you can't do this, but you can do this, and here's how we can make these spaces work and these systems work together as one big whole, that we were able to actually do it.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool, because if somebody had said, nope, we have to have, you know, XYZ finishes in the lobby, and we have to have all this other stuff, we wouldn't have been able to get there.
Yeah.
But being able to pull some of those finishes out allowed us to be able to afford some of the other special systems that needed to be in place.
Yeah.
So,
I think just as a client, though, it seems like the Nature Conservancy would be like a lot more lenient, and they would be a bit more happy to engage something that was more of a creative process versus, you know, something that's just like straight, build us a box, we need this in it, X, Y, and Z.
yeah, they approach things from a more engineering side, and they know that they're not necessarily the most creative. At least the Indiana chapter here, who we worked with. So they basically said, you know, we're the experts at what we do, which is land conservation, and you guys are the experts at what you do, architecture. So we're going to listen to you because you're the expert. You know, tell us what you think we need to do.
Right.
Which was great. They're still to this day one of my favorite clients.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So, when you're going to Ball State, how long does it take to get through the architecture program?
I did it in 5.5 years. Back when I was in school, it was a 5-year program. So you went to school for 5 years and you got a professional degree, which allowed you to go out and get a license to practice architecture.
Right.
Some people did it in that 5 years. I think maybe I took a few too many lower credit hour semesters. So I had a summer afterwards to finish up a few things.
Right.
Some people it took 6 years. Some of the non-traditional students took longer. But that was back then. Now it's typically a 4-year undergraduate degree that's not professional, and then you are required to go get a master's in order to be able to get a license for architecture.
Oh,
so it's 4 plus 2 nowadays, typically.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like going to medical school, man.
Yeah, kind of. Kind of. Only you're studying the same thing the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. When you got out, you know, did you come to Indianapolis first?
I did, but I didn't want to.
You didn't want to?
Well, yeah. So my ultimate goal was to end up in Chicago.
Right.
For a couple of years, and then for some reason, the Pacific Northwest was calling my name. I really enjoyed sustainable architecture. I've been kind of an environmentalist for a long time, and that seemed like the mecca of that type of architecture, that type of mindset.
Yeah.
And when I graduated, I didn't have any money.
Sure.
So I called Ratio Architects here in town, who I'd done my internship with, and said, "Hey guys, I'd like to work for about 6 months, save up a little cash, and then my goal is to move to Chicago." During that 6-month time period, 9/11 happened, and the market just tanked, like completely dried up. Luckily, I was cheap at the time, being just out of college, and I was good, so I was able to keep my job after they laid off a good chunk of people. That was about the time I started to think, it's easy to leave someplace and go to where you think it's better, but maybe more noble or honorable to stay where you're at and try to make that place better.
Right.
And so I started to kind of change the way I thought about where I wanted to go, and there were a lot of things about Indy that I liked. I'd made some really good friends here. Cost of living was cheap.
Sure.
It seemed like architecture needed to be pushed forward a little bit.
For sure.
In terms of kind of modernity. So I stayed.
Yeah.
And I've been here since 2001.
Yeah. And have you been with Ratio your whole career?
No, I was at Ratio from 2001 until 2007. Then I left, not because they were a bad firm or because I had any bad experiences there, but I wanted a slightly different experience. And so I moved over to Axis Architecture, where I'm at now, because they're a much smaller firm, and I felt like I would get a little bit more rounded experience, and it's worked out pretty well.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I was taking my daughter to school today, and she asked me about 9/11.
Yeah.
She said, "Where were you during 9/11?" And just explaining that to a 13-year-old girl,
That'd be tough.
it's weird. It's so weird, and just trying to revisit that day, and I remember it the whole day very vividly.
Yeah, me too.
And where I was, and working in an office, and it was just so surreal. And I remember, so at the time I lived on the east side, or no, I lived downtown. Sorry, and I had finally graduated college, and I got like a professional job. And so I had this was the first time I could afford get a nice car. So I had a Land Rover.
You're all grown up.
Yeah, it's all grown up. And so I had this Land Rover. I'm sorry, back up. I had a leased car, like a Chevy Blazer or something. And my lease was running out, and I was like, well, I don't really want to buy a new car. So I was like, I bought this 95 F-150 truck, red truck.
Yeah.
And I put a stereo in it. And so instead of driving my lease car, I was like, I'm going to drive the red car on Tuesday. And so I'm driving, and normally I would listen to NPR or whatever on the way to work. And I had this CD player in it. So I'm got the CD player, I'm kind of jamming out. And I'm driving to work, and there's just no traffic on the road.
Oh, really?
And it was weird because I got to work 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
I had to be at work at 8:30. I'd leave my house at 10 till 8. Fight traffic, get there. And I got there at 10 after.
Yeah.
There's just no traffic on the road. It was really weird. And I walk in, and I was talking to the manager, and he said a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was like, that's weird,
Yeah.
And I started talking about how a B-24 hit the Empire State Building in fog in World War II. And and I turned on the TV in the break room.
Yeah.
Clear day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And then while I'm standing there, maybe a little bit later, the second plane's like,
Bonk, bonk. Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Yeah.
And it just was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a TV cart in the office.
Yeah.
I remember somebody rolling the TV cart out into the lobby, and a bunch of us were standing there watching. Yeah, at the time I was driving back and forth from Lafayette
Oh, yeah.
to Indy, to Ratio, because I was saving money, so I was living at my parents' house in Lafayette. And so I probably was listening to a CD or something like that too, so I heard nothing on the way to work. And I don't even remember like getting to work and knowing that it was happening. I'm wondering if I might have gotten to work early that day or something, because it seems like there was a length of time when I was at work before it like started to happen.
Right.
And I still to this day too remember my mom calling from home, like trying to get me to come back home,
right?
Because I was in the big city of Indy and something was going to happen. That was a little frightening.
Yeah, it was so weird too. And I was telling her, it was just like, she's like, well, what was it like watching those buildings collapse? And I was like, it was so crazy because I had been to the World Trade Center. I went in like 1991.
Yeah.
And I love those buildings. Like I love when you would go into the lobby and just the way, the light came in, the elevator shafts and everything.
Did you go up to the top too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was telling her about that Limp Bizkit video that was filmed on the helipad and stuff. And when you would go up onto the top, so I think it was one had the observation deck and then the helipad was on the other.
Right, I think you're right, yeah.
And so you could see, across. And the whole time I was watching the video before the towers collapsed, I'm like, why don't they just land a helicopter?
Right.
I was like, there's a helipad, there's, get those people out or whatever. And it just was so strange. And even like now, like I watch all those like 9/11 documentaries and stuff.
Conspiracy theories.
Sure. But that's now that we're talking about this and you're an architect, do you ever have any like opinion about like those towers coming down the way they did?
It's been so long since I've watched anything about it.
Yeah.
That I don't know if I'd be able to form a complete theory on how I think about it. But it was interesting that those explosions that you can see, like coming, it's almost like 5 or 10 stories apart, kind of in a sequence almost.
Yeah.
That it would be a natural sort of collapse.
Yeah.
I'm not one to like believe in conspiracy theories or things like that, but it's hard to think that happened naturally as a product of those planes.
Yeah, I know. There's another guy I really like to listen to, Dave Rubin, and he always says, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
Sure, right.
But it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. It's like,
yeah.
Fuck. It seems weird, but I don't know. Maybe it happened, like, for real.
I suppose anything's possible, but
at the time, though, there was no frame of reference for what you were seeing on TV.
Right.
So it didn't seem real.
No.
It seemed like, oh, that building just collapsed. Like,
yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. I was watching a documentary about it was about like the film scene in like the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the 70s, and it was kind of an analog to like the no wave scene that produced like Sonic Youth and stuff.
Yeah.
But there was a lady that made a film about the World Trade Centers collapsing.
Oh, really?
And so they show a clip of it, and it's like when you watch it, it's just this poor like punk rocker film director. She makes this video of it, and it looks pretty much exactly the same as what
really.
The lighting's not as good.
Yeah.
But I was just like, man, that's strange.
Huh.
But it didn't. It just looked like a special effect or something.
Yeah.
It was so overwhelmingly strange. It just did not seem real and didn't look real.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any Have you ever had any like other architects that are just like, yeah, it's weird, or is that like one of those taboo subjects?
I don't know. I don't recall ever really talking about it in depth with other architects.
Yeah.
I mean, not in the recent time frame where I could actually remember conversations and main points. I'm sure back then it was all just like, holy shit, this happened.
Yeah.
Before the conspiracy theories started to come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't recall any major conversations.
Yeah, such a strange, and I would imagine too, like that's got to be like the largest architectural loss ever. I mean, it just is by volume.
That's a bold statement, but I'd bet it's close.
I mean, unless you're counting like firebombing Dresden or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, it's probably close. It's up there for sure.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, so strange. So shifting gears.
Yeah.
When did
sorry to bring that down.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So you're this like really vibrant artistic kid in a small town. Move to a bigger small town. Go to school. Move to the big city or the medium-sized city.
Right.
And
small city.
you got your career going. Where did motorcycles enter the picture?
Motorcycles came about back in. So I didn't start riding myself until I was kind of later. I'll call it later. I was late bloomer, if you will.
Yeah.
I think it was 2003 when I got my first bike, which was a Vespa P200E.
Okay.
Gasp. It started as a mod, but my father and my mother rode bikes back in the 70s pretty heavily. My mom had her own bike. My dad had a couple bikes.
Yeah.
So I think it was back then that the seed was planted, because I was around bikes, and I don't really remember the experiences like of being around bikes, but the photographs, and there's just something in there that must have come from that time. My first drawings were of cars and motorcycles and that kind of stuff. So it had to have been that started it. I'm sure my dad put me on a motorcycle.
Sure.
Back when I was one. And that's what did it right there.
Right. Well, it's funny because that's just like one of my standard questions I always ask. It's sort of about like planting the seed, and it's like an imprinting thing, man.
I think so.
It's like I don't know if it's like it just happens at the right time, or if it's just such an impressive thing, or it only appeals to certain people. Like, I don't know what the formula is.
It's probably a combination of a bunch of different things. I would think the initial is the imprinting, probably, about, I remember when this was part of my life from back then, or I remember my dad doing this or something. But it quickly becomes, or for me at least, it quickly became something that was pretty visceral in and of itself.
Yeah.
And something that I find helps me to kind of blast out every other thing that's in your head.
Right.
And that becomes pretty addictive.
It does. It does.
The ability to throw everything else away and focus on just one thing at that particular moment.
Yeah.
And it's fun as hell.
It is. It is. So your first bike was a Vespa?
Yeah. 1978 European model P200E.
Uh-huh. How long did you ride that?
I had that for about a year and a half. When I got it, my wife and I lived downtown in the Real Silk building.
Okay.
And so most of my commuting on it was just in the downtown area.
Okay.
So speeds of less than, call it 45. But traveling any faster than that on those little 10-inch wheels was goddamn frightening. And we moved shortly thereafter to the Near East Side in Little Flower.
Right.
And that commute wasn't really a whole lot of fun on that Vespa. So that's when I bought my first motorcycle, which was a 1975 CB 750.
Yeah.
I wish I still had that.
Yeah.
It had a spot on the tank about the size of a pinhead, and that was the only thing wrong with it.
Wow.
It was pristine.
Yeah.
And I sold it like an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's just something about those Honda 4s.
It was like a sewing machine. Like it
Yeah.
was smooth as hell.
Smooth and like just it rolled on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Plenty of power.
Yeah. It was heavy.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily nimble.
No.
But it was fun to ride.
Yeah. A little wide.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I had wanted a CB750 since I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I was driving by a car lot in Anderson, you know. And it's this funny old guy. And for a while, he had like the sickest collection of muscle cars in his lot.
Really?
I mean, and they were all GM muscle cars, but there was GTOs, Le Mans, Camaros, Trans Ams, Skylarks.
Nice.
I mean, every, GM car ever made with like a small
I
block.
was there.
He had this really crazy, it was like a Malibu wagon, and he put like a 396 in it.
Sounds all right.
Orange, black racing stripes. I mean, just really cool collection of cars, and they were all for sale.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would stop in there and just loving cars like I do. I would just check them out. And I think I said to him offhand one day, I was like, "You ever get any motorcycles?" He's like, "Yeah, sometimes." And I'm like, "Well, what do you have?" He's like, "You're not one of those Harley guys, are you?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, I got this old Honda. I'll bring it in." And it was a 74 CB750.
Yeah.
And of course, not thinking, I, stripped off all the paint, painted it flat black,
Yeah.
and, bars and everything, made it into like a, cafe racer.
Yeah.
I rode that for a while, and sold it to a friend, and then he promptly, blew it up. But, yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. Same thing, man. I still regret selling it.
Yeah.
It was a cool bike. Fun to ride.
I made a good amount of money off of it because I bought it from somebody who didn't really know what he had.
Right.
So I think I paid $1,800 for it.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was still original 4-into-4 pipes and everything, not rusted out or anything like that.
Wow.
And I sold it. What I thought was kind of the height of the market for like $5,000 on eBay in like 2 hours.
What?
And I should have let that auction go because I think it would have gotten more, but
Wow.
but I did all right.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Didn't really put any money into it.
You didn't really have to.
Yeah, because it ran just fine.
Yeah. The big problem on mine was the carburetor boots.
Oh yeah,
Mine
were ripped too.
Yeah, I could never get them to seal, and I did the trick with the mint oil and
Soften them up a little bit.
yeah, and I've got it. I could run pretty well, but then getting those carburetors synced up was a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I got it dialed in okay for a while.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
When you get those bikes set up properly, they're nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
One day I was working in Castleton, and I see this guy walk by, and he's got a lab coat on,
Yeah.
and it says Cayenne on the,
Nice.
and I'm like, I need to talk to you, and he's like, about what? And I was like, carburetors. He's like, okay, and so I start asking him about those carburetors. He's just like, man, those are super hard to tune. He's like, what you need is an old Japanese guy that doesn't speak English. He's like, if you can find one that knows those bikes,
Yeah.
he can do it for you. He's like, I'm an engineer. And he's like, I can't help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, okay, so it's not just
You
me.
need somebody that can hear the vibrations of the air moving through the
Yeah.
velocity stack.
Yeah, for sure. So where'd you go from the CB750?
So from that, I think I think when I sold the CB750, I had already bought my first CB450, which turned into kind of my white whale project. But soon after selling the CB750, I think I also sold the Vespa, because I'd kept the Vespa the whole time too, just in the back of the garage. And then I think soon after I sold the 750, I bought a Honda Hawk, the single-sided swing arm, RC40 I think was the designation or something like that. So I had those two bikes for a while, and that Hawk was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, the 450 was fun too, but I could never get it running right for some reason.
Yeah.
The head that was on the bike when I bought it had, I think, leaking valve guides, and so I just pulled that off, swapped the head with new valve guides, and never could get it running right. And would buy other bikes, and that one always kind of kept getting pushed to the back.
Yeah.
I'll fix that later sort of bike, because it had big things waiting for it. There's an aluminum tank over there that was going to go on it, all sorts of stuff, and kept getting put off for easier and quicker projects. Like, I'll just do this one,
right?
Because it only needs this. I'll forget that one later.
Yeah.
So, long story short, the Hawk came into play. I rode that for a while, and then I think I went through a BMW R75/5, and a couple of the other bikes you see down here, the Guzzi in the garage, and then the Ducati was not the most recent purchase, but the one that I tend to ride most often.
That's the one out front.
Yeah.
What's that one?
That's 2007 Classic Sport 1000.
Nice.
Bad name, but great bike.
Yeah.
It seems to do everything perfectly.
Ripper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nimble, so around town it's great. I can ride it for 6-7 hours at a time and not feel uncomfortable.
Right.
It's a bike that I will never sell.
Really?
It's on tape now. So yeah.
It's a bold statement.
So
man.
yeah. If I had to get rid of all my other bikes, it'd be the one to stay.
Yeah.
It just seems to do everything so well.
Yeah. Are you a guy that you like to leave them factory spec, or do you like to mod them?
I tend to want to tweak stuff.
Yeah.
I think right now, the Norton right here is the only one that's stock.
Right.
That I have.
Yeah.
Even the Guzzi's pretty close, but it's been tweaked a little bit.
What model is that Norton?
It's an Atlas, 65 Atlas.
It's beautiful, man.
She's pretty.
Yeah. Was that a restoration or just is that all over?
No, I bought it like that from a friend. The transmission pivot bolt had snapped.
Weird.
And so he hadn't ridden it in a couple of years. So I bought it. Basically, I had to pull the motor out to replace this pin in the bottom of the transmission.
Right.
And it's kind of been relegated to a basement bike for now, but it needs a bit of a clutch adjustment. Other than that, it's good to go.
Yeah.
It sumps oil like a bitch too.
Does it?
Yeah. All the oil right now is in the case.
Dang it. Yeah.
But she's pretty.
Yeah, it sure is. Gorgeous. Yeah, man. I don't know. It's funny. There's because pretty much all motorcycle people are just motorcycle people.
Yeah.
They just like motorcycles.
Agreed.
But there's a definite divide with Harley people and non-Harley people. And then there's an additional extended divide of chopper people and not stock bike people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you like bikes, you can find something to like in every bike.
Right.
But yeah, some people get into it a little too narrow-mindedly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a funny deal, man. So, I think the first time I ever, I don't know if you remember this. I think the first time I ever, like, I don't know if we met in person. I think we had maybe just chatted online. But I had this girlfriend. Do you know where I'm going with this?
No.
There was like an indie Venmodo board.
Okay.
And she and I broke up. And like I built this bike for her. And like it was a pretty bad breakup.
Yeah.
But we kind of got into it online. And I think you like emailed me and you're just like, hey man, we don't want people dropping off the board, so keep your personal shit to yourself. And I was like, yeah, that's fair.
Well, sorry about that.
No, it was fine.
I honestly don't remember that at all. So
no, it was totally fine. And I needed to hear that because I was just like, like I'd gone through this bad breakup, and there was this like, you
were angry, and
I was angry.
Yeah.
And there was this disputed motorcycle, and I'd spent a bunch of money on the house we lived in, and I wasn't going to get it back, and it's funny now, but and then I met you later, and you're just like, you're a nice guy. But, yeah.
Internet tough guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I probably needed a shot of reality, to be honest. But yeah, that's funny, man. So, and you've been involved in the like the Indianapolis like vintage motorcycle scene for pretty much kind of since it started, like came around.
Yeah, I one of my really good friends, Adam Ratcliffe, kind of was the guy that got me into bikes proper from the Vespa debacle, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Scooters are cool. Vespas are really cool. The 750 was a bike that he found and said, if you don't buy this, I'm going to come and slap you,
Right.
and I'm going to buy it.
Right.
He's what got me kind of into the whole scene. He'd been involved with the Ton Up Club for a while, and so he kind of brought me into that fold as well. And from there, it kind of morphed into really being active in Indie Venmodo and the shows, Rockers Reunion, and stuff like that. So,
Right.
So yeah, it's been a good 10 years or so.
And that's coming up pretty soon, huh?
Yeah. So the place is going to be the same as it has been the past couple of years, Fountain Square. June 10th is the date we're shooting for this year, or that we'll be doing it this year. It's changed up a little bit in that Ton Up Club is kind of no longer involved in the planning of it. But me and a couple of other guys are kind of taking what had been done through the Ton Up Club and running with it. So the idea this year is to make it a little bit more inclusive. The Rockers Reunion name had a certain kind of style connotation to it, and there's a lot more than that here in Indy. There's so many different little pockets of riders and types of bikes, and it's all cool as hell.
Right.
And we'd really like to just kind of see all of it. We want to create a place where people don't feel like, oh, that's a chopper show. Like, I don't want to go check that out. Not that there's not a place for that kind of stuff, because there is.
Right.
Or, oh, that's a cafe racer show. Like, it's not my kind of scene.
Right.
There's so many different interactions, because Indy's really not that big.
Yeah.
That
It is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And whenever I interview people from here, that's kind of one of those things we stop and talk about.
Yeah.
It's a big metropolitan area, and it's spread out.
Yeah.
So, you've got from Columbus to Kokomo to, I don't know, Plainfield to, Richmond or whatever. I don't know. But it's so spread out. It's so low it's a low density city.
Agreed.
It's like a 1 or 2 story city mainly.
Yep.
And so it's a big area, but you're right. It's there's not a lot of like we probably between the two of us, we probably know like 90% of the people that ride old bikes.
Yeah,
in the city.
right.
And sometimes I don't know, like I was rag on Austin. It seems like, but like that's always my go-to like example. But like when I went to Austin, I've been to Austin a couple of times.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing.
Is it?
Yeah, about half the size of Indy, but I expected it to be so much more. I expected a lot more bikes, especially vintage bikes and choppers, and it just wasn't there.
Huh.
So,
do you think you expected it because of the hand-built show and kind of the press that it gets, or?
Yeah, and Giddy Up and whatnot, and I think they do bring in a lot of people, but just as like around town, I didn't see as much as I thought I would.
Yeah.
And I feel like people here in Indianapolis, like we're not, because we're so Midwestern, we're not very quick to acknowledge what's cool about Indianapolis or pat ourselves on the back. But
yeah, I would agree.
I think it's pretty respectable here, man.
Yeah, that's kind of why I stayed too.
Yeah,
people here honest,
right.
In regards to the motorcycling scene in general, it's weird having moved a little bit further north from kind of the downtown area because I don't see hardly anything at all up here. But downtown and even on the Near East side, I'd see stuff all the time.
Sure.
Of course, it helped that the steer end was a block away from my old house.
Right.
So you'd hear stuff just around, just going there on a random, Wednesday or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to kind of have been involved for as long as I have been. I'm going to sound really old now, but everybody has kind of grown up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's me looking at the world differently or me not being as enthusiastic about like everything motorcycles. Not that I'm not still enthusiastic about it, but it seems like the scene, in air quotes, is quieting down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just me or if other people are perceiving that as well.
I think it's changed. I mean, I can tell you, like, definitely from like the Harley, chopper side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's like a whole other group of like young guys in their 20s.
Good.
That they have a garage on the north side, and and sometimes I'll see them, or like on Instagram I'll see them.
Yeah.
I'll be scrolling.
You're talking about like Doug and those guys.
Yeah, those cats, and I'll see them, and they're like out for a ride, and like my bike's just a constant project. Like hopefully it'll be done really soon, but I've been saying that forever. But
8 years on my white whale project.
But sometimes I'm like, man, I wish those dudes would have called me. And I'm like, they're not gonna call you, dude. Like, they're your friends, but like they're like dudes in their 20s. Like they're doing 20s dude stuff.
Yeah,
so why are they gonna call some old dude? But it's cool. I really like that aspect of seeing like younger people come into it.
Yeah.
And I also equally enjoy seeing like guys who've been into it for a long time that stick with it.
Yeah.
And they have that like pride and joy bike, and they've been riding it for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and they know every inch of it, and they know the sounds it makes, and all that. So it's cool stuff.
That's good stuff for sure.
Yeah. I always say that like motorcycles, they're like a very giving hobby.
Yeah.
They give you so much more than the expense or the pride of owning the object.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it really. I mean, the dude that wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance died today.
Right.
It's true, man. It's like there's a certain like feeling.
There's definitely a sense of kind of responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah.
Not only from hey, I'm taking this old thing and I am making sure that it continues for the future generations or whatever lofty ideal. But there's also more of a sense of I'm responsible for myself in that I've got to make sure this thing doesn't fall apart when I ride it down the road, and or I need to know how to fix it if it breaks.
Yeah.
And I'm out in the middle of BFE somewhere.
Right.
So there's a number of different kind of responsibility realms that come with vintage motorcycling, and I think it definitely helps build a person.
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost kind of like that. You're a teacher that just kind of would swipe your paint or whatever. It gives you motorcycles have this way of like reminding you to keep things in perspective.
Yeah. Oh, you thought you were the best mechanic in the world because you changed the spark plug, and now figure this carb issue out.
Yeah. It makes no sense at all, but eventually you'll figure out how to do it the right way.
Yeah. There's definitely some parallels between kind of architecture in general and motorcycles.
Yeah.
Being that, in architecture you kind of have to think about as many things at once to come up with a design that works well for these situations you're given.
Yeah.
Motorcycling is the same way, and vintage motorcycles in general, because so many systems and issues manifest themselves in ways that aren't necessarily easily recognizable.
Right.
So you have to think, okay, what's this system doing, and how is it affecting everything else?
Right.
So I can figure out why that sounds like it's coming from over here, and it's actually this other thing.
Right. And how does it all go together?
Yeah. Why does it seem like it's running out of gas when there's gas? But, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's the gas cap. It's clogged.
Yeah. Something's completely ridiculous. Like a piece of rubber got in the carburetor and the float's not moving.
Right. I still distinctly remember the first time I had the issue with the oh damn it. This is good audio right now. the breather in the gas cap clogged on one of my bikes. And I remember pulling over the side of the road, looking and seeing that there's fuel in the line, like, what the fuck, why won't it start? Pull the spark plug out, getting spark, all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I, released the gas cap and heard that sound, I was like, oh, fuck. That's what it was. Like, it was vapor locked.
Yeah. God. That's so crazy.
Because that was 30 minutes of my life I won't get back.
Yeah, but
I learned a lesson. Yeah.
You learned a valuable lesson. Yeah. Well, right on, man. So, you got any big plans with like your career coming up? You gonna stay at Axis for a while? Do you think? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I'm an associate principal there now, so that's all right.
Yeah.
one step away from the big spot.
Nice.
So yeah, it's going pretty well. We're doing well in terms of getting good projects and having good clients and being able to produce good work.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fun.
Are you getting to do much of the sustainable architecture that you like?
We haven't done a whole lot of that in the recent years. I don't know if it was kind of the market downturn that kind of kept some of that stuff from happening, but there's actually 2 projects I'm working on right now down in Bloomington that will end up being LEED certified, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it didn't take off as much as I thought it would.
It's kind of a hard sell in the Midwest, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Not really as preparation, but just sort of as incidentally. It may have been the reason why. We talked before about interviewing you, but I started watching that Grand Designs on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
and I'm always like really fascinated by how like different regions they can do different things with architecture.
Yeah.
And I think in Indiana, because it's like you have such an extreme of temperature, like brutally cold, and just like hot as balls,
Yeah.
And I think that makes people here just like, give me something basic that works, that I don't have to screw with, but make it look pretty.
Yeah. it's a very, very conservative market
Yeah.
from kind of all aspects.
Yeah.
Monetarily speaking, people don't necessarily want to spend, an extravagant amount on architecture.
Sure.
Because design in general is kind of looked at pretty conservatively too.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like you said before, Hoosiers are kind of humble people,
Yeah.
and a lot of times they don't want to be seen as spreading wealth.
Showy.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny though because I mean, Indiana has with all the like architecture in Columbus, and,
Yeah, there's good precedent for it.
and like some of the design stuff like Dunbar Furniture and just like some of the different like local architects and stuff. I mean, there's definitely like a legacy of like notable stuff.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. Architecture doesn't have to be expensive to be good.
Yeah.
So many people think it does, but
Right.
so many people really just think that we're expensive.
Right.
As a professional, paying an architect fees tends to be taboo, I think, in some situations.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But it's totally worth it.
Yeah. I think it's that like agricultural kind of ethic
Yeah.
that still kind of lingers.
Yeah. Give me 20,000 square feet of barn.
Pretty
And
much.
I can do whatever I need to do inside of it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, there's times too, like when I did my senior thesis on like the history of architectural preservation,
Yeah.
and that's always kind of been like something I've held my interest, and that kind of bums me out too, man, because
Yeah.
like some of the significant buildings around town that have gone.
Yeah.
Like you look at pictures of like the old Indianapolis courthouse or the opera building or something, and it seems like people here they tear down a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I would agree.
And stuff that's pretty cool,
Yeah.
and that bums me out. So, but I think it's changing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think architecture is becoming as more people move downtown and more people are exposed to architecture of other areas, and becoming more of a product that people realize the value of.
Right.
You can build a barn for X number of dollars, but if there are so many barns around, people aren't going to want to go to a barn if there's a hotel, we'll call it, for lack of a better building type, to go to. And I think people are realizing that hotels are now the thing that is good for business, employee satisfaction, like all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think of the new projects there, like Washington and Delaware by the City County building?
so the transit center right there was actually one of my designs.
No way.
Yeah.
I drove by that on the way up here.
Yeah, it turned out a little bit differently than what we kind of originally were wanting. But again, it's not ours, so influences from the city kind of tweak things a little bit, but it's still, I think, a great project. It makes a great statement as you're coming west on Washington.
Yeah.
There's a project right now that's going on across the street in the City County Building Plaza, which will kind of transform that gateway even more.
Yeah.
So I think
Is that you too?
that is Axis with Rundell Ernstberger. It's not me in particular, but we're working on it.
Nice.
Yeah, the whole downtown area there
Right.
is really coming into its own. I think the Cummins building is beautiful. I love that project.
It's cool.
Some of the stuff on Market Street, the apartments. There's some good stuff and there's some okay stuff. Some of the stuff that's happening on like Virginia down in Fountain Square, I wish had a little bit more honor in it. Projects like the Slate I think are really good. There's a couple of other ones that leave a little to be desired.
Yeah.
And I'm a little worried at what might come of those buildings 20 years from now.
Yeah.
because they're being put up pretty quickly and because they're being put up fairly inexpensively,
Right.
they may not fare too well
Right.
in the, call it, short term.
Right.
But it's good that it's bringing more people downtown so business can thrive. The more people that come down here, the more people that stay here. And so it's an incremental sort of thing.
Yeah. It's really insane. I mean, I've lived in Indianapolis since 1990.
Yeah.
And I remember when I lived at the end of Massachusetts, where the bookstore is now.
Okay.
I lived in that building above. And then I worked at Basbo.
Oh, nice.
So at the extreme other end of
Yeah.
Massachusetts. And there was nothing. I mean, there was Betty Boop's, which was like a gay club.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Really?
I mean, all of those storefronts were vacant.
Wow.
And
What about the Chatterbox? Was it there?
that was there.
Okay.
Chatterbox and Old Point were there, sorry. But there was a barber shop next to the Old Point, and that was it, man.
Wow.
I mean, there just was, the Davlin used to be called the Hoosier Hotel.
Yeah.
It was like Section 8 poverty apartments.
Yeah.
And it was awful. It was very, very bad. Very run down. And now, man, you walk down there and it's just like, you turn on Massachusetts and you got that beautiful vista of the city in the background, and it's
Tons of people.
lit up. There's foot traffic. I mean, there's the Athenaeum is just always hopping.
Yeah.
In Fountain Square. I mean, I remember going to the Fountain Square in the 90s, and like there'd be like packs of roving wild dogs.
It was basically the Fountain Square Theater building back then, wasn't it? And that was it.
I remember that before
Oh, really?
he bought it.
Before Linton bought it?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a value village before Value World,
Huh.
but the Fountain Room, that was a thrift store,
Oh, wow.
and it had a drop ceiling in it,
Uh-huh.
maybe 10 feet high, and the floor was just like brush painted black,
Oh, wow.
and it just was crap, man. I mean, it smelled like a sewer all the time, and those like nice like marble pieces, below the window,
Yeah.
those were all falling off.
Oh, wow.
Like the weather would get in behind and push
Yeah.
it up. And now it's just when that apartment condo building is done, I feel like that's going to radically change the neighborhood.
Yeah, the one just north of Pioneer.
Yeah.
Is that the Goodwill lot? Yeah, the
Yeah.
old Goodwill lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I feel like the whole character of the neighborhood is just going to change rapidly.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's going to bring in like a completely different demographic. It's going to be higher, socioeconomic people.
Right.
And it's going to be a lot of people, like my parents' age, and they're going to be like, "Oh, this is lovely."
This is the cool new area.
Yeah. What can I get for a comparable price?
Sure.
And so like it worries me a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, artists always come in, create culture, and then get pushed out.
yeah.
The next big question is, where are they going to go now? And what's going to be the next Fountain Square?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we will know until it happens.
I used to think about that a lot,
Yeah.
and I remember I was doing carpentry with a guy, and he was wanting to buy some like investment property, and I said, what you should do is you should buy all of the property between New York Street and Michigan Street on Highland.
Yeah.
Because it's on a hill, it's one of the few
Mm-hmm.
views in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time it was just like little cracker box houses.
Yeah.
And they were like cheap, they were like $5,000-$10,000 houses. And he was like, I don't know, those houses are pretty run down. And I'm like, well, obviously you're going to tear them down and like build something when the people realize how cool it is. He's like, I don't know. And then now it's just like there's all those big houses there. But I don't know, man. I think, and I mean, you might be able to tell me this, but I think to make like a neighborhood sustainable and cohesive as like a community area, you kind of have to have some borders. You need like big boulevards or bridges or highways or rivers or whatever. And I don't know that there's that many areas left like that in Indianapolis.
I would agree. I totally agree. And that's why places like Chicago work so well. There are natural boundaries in that space. So who knows? That's Indy's big problem, in my opinion, is the sprawl. Yeah. Because there's nothing that stops you from continuing.
Chicago's funny too. I went up there. Gosh, when was that? This was in February. We had that. I went up for Mama Tried in Milwaukee. Yeah. We had that.
How was this year's show? Was it good?
It was good.
Yeah.
It was really good.
How was the lighting?
Much better. Did you go last year?
Yeah, I went last year. Yeah.
Yeah, it was much better.
Good.
Same venue. The downstairs lighting was a little too bright.
A little too fluorescent.
But it was good. I mean, they had the windows and the doors popped open because it was so warm. I mean, it was like 65 in Milwaukee in February, which is unheard of.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But we stopped in Chicago to pick up some friends, and we went through Bridgeton in Chicago. Okay. And I was just like, why is this not like the hippest spot in Chicago? Because it's super cool. It's all 19th century. Yeah. It's like cool, narrow streets, cool corners, nice, low-rise buildings, like cool Victorian architecture. Yeah. And it's just, it's not.
Is it because there's just not an L stop or something?
I don't know. It's just one of those like kind of like anomalies, and it's just like, Chicago is so much more expensive than Indianapolis. Yeah. You would think that would be a place where people would like rapidly move in, turn, gentrify it, make it cool. So I mean, to me, I don't know. I've heard some people say that like Stringtown in Indianapolis is going to be big at one point, but I drove through Stringtown recently, and it's still pretty rough.
A little rough.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, anything else coming up?
The reunion, June 10th.
Yeah. Summer plans?
11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Summer plans, some aren't. I'm going to have to work on this house. Yeah. I think I ended up not photographing for IndyCar this year because it would take all my vacation days. Mm-hmm. And so
we didn't even talk about that.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to spend that time working on the house.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful, man.
Thanks.
You totally scored at this place. It's really, and you guys have really made it a home.
I think it was basically this room that got me. I'm going to bring motorcycles inside. Yeah. Have a shop right next to it.
And I can watch TV and listen to music. Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Well, thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for coming over. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, that was my conversation with Eric Anderson. Hell of a nice guy, super good taste, extremely humble, and very, very talented. Real pleasure to talk to him. You can keep up with everything going on with Eric, and you can do that by checking out his Instagram, and his handle is EJAND22. So that's like Eric J. Anderson, but EJAND22. He's got a lot of examples of his photography, motorcycle stuff, and whatnot. Or you can check out his work on his company's website, and that's axisarch.com, and that's Axis Architecture. What else? If you want to support the show, obviously there's a couple ways you can do that. You can buy a shirt in our Big Cartel. You can also make a donation or become a subscriber on Patreon. Or, if you wanna, you can tell a friend about it. You can give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also share these podcasts on social media. If you go to the blog, you will see some curated additional content related to the interview. You'll also find a bunch of links to listen on your mobile device, or you can listen by going to our YouTube channel and just listening to the audio, and those are perfect for sharing on Twitter, Facebook, texting your friends, so on and so forth. So feel free to do that. Not really much coming up this week. I got pretty much all the rest of the parts I need to finally finish up my shovel head. Went down to Dave Herr's house the other day, and he redid the pipes so I can use my alphabet collector on a cone shovel with my forward controls. And if you follow my personal Instagram, you'll see all that stuff. But yeah, I just really want to get that damn thing done so I can ride once it decides what season it's going to be. But yeah, that's about it. As always, thanks for your support. Always appreciate the comments and criticisms via the Instagram profile. And if you want to give us a follow there, that is rulers_and_riders. And you can also find us now on Facebook. Facebook, profiles are a little bit weird, but if you follow me, I definitely see it, and I try to post stuff on there whenever, Facebook will let me. That's going to about do it for this episode of Rulers and Riders. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you down the road.